Charles Darwin once described nature as a tangled bank, clothed with many plants of many kinds, with various insects, with birds, with worms, all dependent upon each other in so complex a manner. This reminds us that we are part of an interconnected system, something we as humans so often forget given our egocentric nature. But sometimes we need to remember to take an ecocentric view of the world. Let's begin with something as ordinary as a sunny summer day. You're at the beach, you put on your sunscreen as you've always been told to do to protect yourself, and you dive into the sea, the lake, the ocean. But what you may not know is that you could be harming the plants underneath the water. These plants are really crucial to our ecosystems. We've all seen that film of sunscreen on top of bodies of water, particularly on a very popular, busy summer day. So we know it does in fact rub off. This is what intrigued me initially. Although it was impossible for me to address such global concerns within the ambits of my extended essay, I decided to enter into the conversation by investigating the impact of sunscreen at different concentrations on the photosynthetic activity of a freshwater plant called Egeria densa, also known as Brazilian waterweed. This is a particularly important plant for aquatic ecosystems due to the role they play as primary producers and nutrient and water recyclers. Freshwater species are also crucial to investigate, as a recent study published in the journal Nature suggested that they are more fragile than we thought, with 25% of them currently faced with extinction. I began my investigation by placing samples of Egeria densa in different concentrations of sunscreen, ranging from 40 milligrams per liter to 200 milligrams per liter. I then proceeded to, after a week, measure the diameter of the oxygen bubble produced. What I found was complicated. While my results did suggest that higher concentrations of sunscreen did reduce photosynthetic activity, the data was not strong enough to be considered statistically conclusive and reliable, unfortunately in part due to the sensitivity of the apparatus I had available. This is where, in order to continue exploring, I had to rely on the works of others. So scientists with better technology and stronger methods at institutions like Shandong Agricultural University in China and the University of the Balearic Islands were able to test the effects of specific sunscreen ingredients and compounds like oxybenzone, avobenzone, and octocrylene. The sunscreen I used in my own investigation was of the brand Coppertone, which was one of few still available commercially that still contained many of these ingredients. Thanks to many of them being banned due to research by the Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which linked them to coral bleaching, immune and reproductive damage in sea urchins, and male fish feminization, as in male fish adopting female characteristics. So if you weren't quite hooked by the aspect of plants, maybe this is a slightly more entertaining reason for my research. So unfortunately, there is still limited awareness of the impact that old sunscreens that still contain many of these chemicals has on delicate freshwater systems. So that is the reason why I conducted my research. So studies carried out have found that ingredients like oxybenzone don't just affect these corals and, well, fish, that they can also interfere with plants. So a study at the Agricultural University in Shandong in China found that oxybenzone can reduce chlorophyll, which is the pigment that plants use to capture sunlight and use it for photosynthesis, by as much as 40%. In my own work, I found that even at the lowest concentrations of sunscreen of 40 milligrams per liter, the photosynthetic activity of Egeria densa was reduced by around 16%. At higher concentrations, some samples even stopped producing oxygen entirely, possibly due to plant stress, mainly through the overabundance of reactive oxygen species, or ROS for short, or plant death. So photosynthesis can be thought of like a factory. Sunlight comes in, energy gets processed, and oxygen comes out. These chemicals like oxybenzone essentially jam the conveyor belts in these factories. So with jammed conveyor belts, obviously the factory is halted. But here's where it gets interesting. Not all sunscreens or plants react in the same way. In one study, researchers at the University of the Balearic Islands found that the ability of a seagrass called Posidonia oceanica to photosynthesize was actually enhanced in the short term when exposed to sunscreen. This was attributed to potential nutrient release, like phosphates and ammonium, from the sunscreen. However, it's still complicated because in the long run, it also noticed a reduction in chlorophyll, which, similar to the Shandong Agricultural University, means that without chlorophyll, you get less photosynthesis. Without photosynthesis, less oxygen. So the story is complicated. Sunscreen might appear harmless or even beneficial at first, but in the long run, it may damage the internal structures of plants. And they are then dependent on to survive. But if we take a step back, this is more than just about sunscreen. It's not just about these particular species of plants, or these corals, or these sea urchins, or these fish that have become involuntarily transgender. But it also means that primary, secondary, tertiary, and so forth consumers are also affected. And, of course, us humans. Because without photosynthesis, no oxygen is produced. And without oxygen, well, I'll let you come to your own conclusions. So the challenge now is to shift our perspectives from egocentric, I know it'll be difficult, to ecocentric. To appreciate that even small, everyday actions, like the type of sunscreen you buy, is part of something larger. Some could say a tangled bank. Thank you.